Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable Roaring Twenties event. And it is so great to see Steve Greenfield from Automotive Ventures here with us at the Roaring Twenties. Steve, welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Ted, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
And Steve, you really fit the part. You really look like you belong in the 1920s.
Well, I tried to dress up for the occasion. I mean, look at you.
Exactly. And you know what, though? It's so amazing, the technology and how rapidly things are happening right now in our industry. And there's nobody better than you. You're right on top of all that stuff.
Well, it's great that this is, the themes of the 20s, because, I had a new book out earlier this summer. It's been out for about 2 months now. And, the central thesis to that book is, we're going to see more change in the next 5 or 10 years than we've seen in the last 100. So here we are, 100th anniversary of this attire. And, putting that into perspective, that just this pace of change is really amazing for all of us kind of to be riding this wave right now.
Yeah, I agree. And congratulations on the book as well. A lot of accolades going on right now. So I'm excited what you got to share with our audience today. So
that's great. So if we can flip over to the slides here. As I said, the book's out. So if any of the audience today wants a copy, just reach out to me. It's simply steve@automotiveventures.com. Happy to send you a copy. You can also find it on Amazon. We've got, the physical copy if you like the old school read. If you like a digital copy, and we've also got an audio book out. So any of the three. And again, just ping me or go on to Amazon, whichever you'd like. And love to not only have you read it, but also give your feedback. So let me know whether there's things you like about the book, if there's things that are controversial and you don't like. But as you said, Ted, I'm very pleasantly surprised with the reception and the fact that I think it's forcing the right conversations at the right levels in the industry.
Your timing for this book, Steve, could not be any better.
Well, thanks. So I think so too. And, there's a lot of, like I said earlier, there's a lot of change coming, and, just trying to provide a framework for that to folks.
Love it.
So Ted, let me move a little bit ahead. Maybe I'll put into context a little bit of the book for those that haven't had a chance to see it, and maybe even better for those that have had a chance to read through some of the chapters. But anywhere we look, and Ted, I've had this conversation now numerous times, but anywhere you look across the industry, there's a bunch of change coming, right? Not the least of which is to the franchise dealer network. There's a lot of talk about OEMs going to more of an agency model, and really just redefining the relationship between the manufacturer and the dealer, where the manufacturer will take much more control over inventory, advertising, and the consumer experience. And in the extreme example that we're seeing over in Europe and down in Australia, dealers are largely redefined into just being an agent, where they are a point of distribution for the consumer to come in and pick up the car they've already ordered, and still service the vehicles. But servicing on the other side, there's a lot of angst right now, because as we move very aggressively to electrification, those cars are going to be much more reliable, fewer moving parts. So both from a service interval standpoint and a parts standpoint, these vehicles are going to be much more reliable and just be in the shop less frequently, right? So across all of these elements, it's a lot for the average industry participant to digest. And so what we've done as a complement to the book is tried to provide a framework for that. So love to chat a little bit about that today, and then we can poke and prod around on it. But as any typical risk assessment, you try to evaluate the probability of anything happening, and then if it does happen, what the magnitude of the effect is, right? So you can then, for any individual theme that we just looked at, you can plot them on here and say, okay, well, the things that are very probable and also have a high impact would be up in the red. If things are either improbable and or have low impact, if they hit, it's like we can put them in green and ignore them for now. So we don't get overwhelmed with all of these different issues. We can actually just focus on the ones that have a higher probability and a higher impact. So what I've done, and had great dialogue since we released this about 2 months ago now, is provide what we're calling the Automotive Ventures Retail Risk Assessment. So breaking down the 16 different trends with a definition of each, and providing from my vantage point, people can differ, and we're happy to have that dialogue, but the probability and the magnitude of these things happening, which then allows us to map all of these 16 different elements onto one grid and spend time looking and saying, okay, so, if I'm an industry participant, which of these things am I okay to kind of ignore, monitor, but ignore for now? But which ones should I spend the most time on? So, with your permission, Ted, I wouldn't mind digging into a couple of these today, and then we can have some conversation about them.
I am keenly interested. I had a dealer reach out to me last evening, a small dealer who's got life savings tied up in their dealership, and said, you know what? I've got everything on the line with my store. We're doing very well, but we're having a tough time getting inventory. There's all this talk about the agency model. There's a talk, electrification is coming. He goes, I need to really understand where we're headed. So you're right on the money, Steve.
Yeah, and Ted, I get that conversation all the time. I have the luxury of being able to talk, as you do, to a bunch of owners every week. And the question I often get is, how big do I need to be? Given all of these changes that are going on in the industry, how big do I need to be to feel comfortable at night that I have a defensible business? And I think that for the single rooftop dealer who's beholden to one manufacturer, it's really tough, right? Because if that manufacturer is very generous and understanding of the value of franchise dealers, they're good. But if you happen to be aligned with a manufacturer that, say, does want to move aggressively and start to change like how much profit you can make on the front end, whether they're going to give you any credits for carrying inventory, whether they're going to help continue to subsidize your advertising, that's a big challenge, right? And some of these brands that we've heard from that are going to go all electric, and some of those dealers that have invested in like the infrastructure to support internal combustion engines might effectively be left behind in this transition. So I think it is creating a lot of angst for dealers, whether it's single rooftop dealers or a group that's got 15 or 25 stores. They're still craving the same thing. It's like, what can I do in this environment of rapid change to understand these elements and then prepare for the change that's inevitably coming?
Wow. And love the visual. It's very, very clear, what we need to be focused on. So.
Yeah. So, picking off a couple of those, you and I have talked a bit before about over-the-air updates. I think, the example I love to use is 5 years ago when Tesla came out with the Model 3, Consumer Reports panned the vehicle because they found that its braking was worse than an F-150. And then, in typical Elon Musk fashion, he got on Twitter and he was irate about this rating from Consumer Reports. 3 days later, he circles back to Consumer Reports and asks them to reevaluate the driving dynamics of this vehicle. They, of course, say, no, we never reevaluate vehicles. Our methodology is very scientific. But he finally convinces them to test the car again. And suddenly, it breaks very competitively with its asset class, and something like 15 feet shorter to brake over a 60 mile per hour to zero braking span. So, this really opened the eyes of the world that with one software update, nobody physically touched that vehicle. But with a software update to the car, you could change the driving dynamics and characteristics of a vehicle. Well, fast forward 5 years, and it's very common now that, manufacturers, not only Tesla, are talking about all the efficiencies that will be gained by not having to bring cars in for recalls, for warranty work, what have you. Anything that they will be able to push a software update and change the characteristics, they'll be very proactively doing. And depending on the consulting firm, something like a third of the warranty work could go away. Most of the recall work could go away, except where they need to actually change hardware in the vehicle. And this is going to be definitely an impact to dealers, and they need to prepare for this. There's not much that they're going to be able to do. It's going to be greatly much more convenient for a consumer that whether it's warranty work or a recall, they're going to effectively be alerted the next morning when they go into their car. Hey, overnight, we updated the software system. And by the way, we corrected these 3 glitches, and have fun driving today. But it will mean that these consumers will be coming in less frequently to dealers.
And, from a consumer point of view, Steve, what a great time to be a consumer, to have this. We've never even had the thought of this. And now for the consumer, this is a great revelation.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, the next one immediately down in that red area you can see on the screen is servicing of vehicles. And as we said earlier, these EVs, although it's a very, very small percentage of vehicles in operation, And even, when EVs get to being a substantial percentage of new car sales every year, we're still going to have the vast majority of cars in operation are going to be internal combustion engine vehicles, ICE vehicles. But having said that, there's going to be a lot of changes coming to dealer service base. These cars are going to have fewer or longer service intervals. They won't be in to the shop nearly as much. Fewer part sales to these vehicles and the vehicle owners and the folks that are working on them. But the flip side is you're going to need very specialized technician skill. You're going to need very specialized tools. So I think the countervailing force will be when we are working on these cars, the billable rate will be higher. And I also think that we're going to see a pretty massive reduction in the defection rate at the end of the warranty period, because I think the independent shops just aren't going to have the technician sophistication nor the tools to work on these cars. And so I think from a frequency standpoint, probably see the cars less frequently, but the average repair bill might be higher. And also the loyalty back to franchise dealers could be much higher, which is, a great off-putting sort of like countervailing effect.
Les Silver was on the show back in May, just after you spoke, and he did a whole segment on parts and service preparing for EVs. And he did a study and looked at that average repair order dollar amount, looked at what was being paid on the Tesla side. He saw that the average repair order will be significantly higher now on EVs. And he told our audience about that.
Yeah, I totally agree with Les. Great guy. Definitely has tremendous amount of subject matter expertise in the industry. And I think he's right on 100%.
Yeah, love it.
So the last one I'll touch on here is just like, as you said earlier, like what they're calling the agency model. And, dealers need to be finely attuned to what their OEM or OEMs are doing overseas. Most notably, Stellantis, the Fiat, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram brands, effectively terminated all 15,000 of their franchise dealers in Europe back in June, and told them basically that, hey, you're still going to be able to represent us and represent the brand, but we're kind of tearing up the franchise agreements and we're replacing it with an agency agreement. And the differences at a high level are effectively, you'll no longer take any inventory risk. You won't be stocking cars. We will be handling advertising. So your cost to advertise will be lower, but now we'll advertise and try to get consumers to come to our website to pre-order vehicles. You'll still be a point of delivery, but you'll have very little or limited consumer interaction around a car sale. But we still want you to thrive and, service these vehicles after they are sold, et cetera. So you'll still have a lifetime value of the customer. But as you can imagine, it's causing a lot of anxiety. Mercedes-Benz has moved over to this same model in Australia. And now we've got a big lawsuit where the majority of Australian dealers are suing Mercedes-Benz. But, as I always tell dealers here in America when I meet with them, these are the same OEMs in the same boardrooms who are looking at a global map and deciding what are they going to do country by country. And so while we do have state franchise laws that are very defensible and protect the dealers here, from a franchisee standpoint, I do think you're going to see elements of manufacturers pushing as aggressively as they can to one where they own the consumer experience. They get consumers to pre-order vehicles. We've seen evidence of this, with the Hummer, the electric Hummer pickup truck, with the F-150 Lightning, with the Mach-E. Very much more like a Tesla experience where you get online, you configure the car you want, and they'll still use dealers to deliver the vehicles. But, in terms of all of the other profit centers associated with that car sale, the trade, financing of the vehicle, F&I products, I think that's all to be determined, if all of that will get pre-negotiated effectively with the OEM before that consumer ever walks into the dealership. And if so, how, if anything, will that revenue be shared back to the dealer?
Wow. What a discussion. And you're right. The dealer franchise laws here in the United States are strong, and we're going to see how much the OEMs want to push the envelope and how much the dealers are going to push back on that. So I guess we're all going to stay tuned.
Yeah. The last thing I'll mention, Ted, if we got a minute, is like subscriptions are the great hope to me, right? So offsetting all of these things is like, if we can condition a consumer who now pays for their Disney Plus and their Netflix subscriptions, et cetera, to think of their car more as a device onto which they can add applications, apps, and subscriptions, as many of the OEMs are saying. I mean, you saw recently that BMW overseas, for example, is building heated seat functionality into the car, and then allowing the consumer to either pay up front for that functionality or pay per month as needed. And I think this opens an entirely new world. Porsche's talked about, hey, for some of their models, you'll be able to unlock another 50 horsepower. I know that, for example, Audi has talked about unlocking battery range. When you run out at the side of the road, you'll be able to pay $100 and get another 50 miles on your battery. All of these things are new revenue streams, high profit margin. What we don't know is how that revenue will be shared between the OEM and the dealer. For those OEMs that bring the dealer into the equation, this could be a brand new high margin revenue stream for dealers that make them much more profitable in the past. But I think we'll see how it plays out. There'll be some OEMs that aren't willing to share too much back with the dealers. There'll be some OEMs that are very generous. But I think in terms of brand new high margin revenue streams, the subscription model and all these features gets me probably most excited.
And Steve, one of the panels we have here at this event at the Roaring Twenties is a panel on EV readiness, which includes the conversation about a subscription model for maintaining that EV vehicle. And it is not the OEMs who are the ones behind that. It's on the dealer's side. So a lot of good discussion about that.
That's great to hear. And I love it, because I think too often dealers feel they're at the whim here of OEM decisions. And there's a tremendous amount that dealers can be doing from their level.
Love it. Great information, Steve. Thank you.
So I think that's pretty much all I have, Ted, unless you got additional questions. Just wanted to provide my contact information. Like I said, happy to send anyone a book. Just reach out to me. You can find me online. And I'm just really honored to be here, Ted, and really appreciate everything that you do for the industry.
Steve, equally honored to have you with our audience, and everybody, we highly recommend the book, The Future of Automotive Retail. The author is here with us today. Steve Greenfield from Automotive Ventures has just given us a glimpse into some of the things that are coming rapidly in our industry, and it's pretty obvious to see what the low-hanging fruit is. And Steve, on behalf of the Fixed Ops Roundtable, I want to thank you so much for your time today. And if our audience wants to reach out to you, of course, they can get the book, as you mentioned, on Amazon as well. But I see your website as well, automotiveventures.com. And you're also on social media, a very big player on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and Steve at automotiveventures.com if you'd like to email me as well.
Great. Steve Greenfield, on behalf of the Fixed Ops community, thank you so much today.
Thank you, Ted. Thanks for having me today. Great.